I'm delighted to welcome today Hils Crisp and Lesley Waldron, who would like to talk about the subject of menopause and perimenopause and maybe postmenopause, where I am, thank God. Um, let's let's have an introduction. Hils, we kind of know each other through networking, so tell us a bit about your background to start off with.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Hils Crisp, and I'm a business marketing and confidence coach. I've been self-employed for about 8 years. My background is marketing, and then I retrained in personal development. And then about 5 years ago, I sort of brought everything together. So I weave together sort of marketing, coaching, and training, and personal development as well. And I am in perimenopause, definitely, and quite in a way potentially slightly earlier than many people. I think I've probably been in perimenopause for a few years, but I had my only child very late. So he's only 2.5 now. I'm 47. And I think I was probably perimenopausal before having him and struggling to get pregnant. We had an IVF journey. So yeah, I'm in quite a difficult, weird, not the normal sandwich, but a different sandwich of having a very young child that is obviously very demanding, time wise and everything else. And then this sort of perimenopause where I'm like craving time to myself and downtime and quiet and all of this, which is difficult to say the least. So
Yeah.
that's a little bit about where I am at.
Okay, welcome. So I didn't realise that you'd had your child at 45. That's amazing. So well done to
Yeah.
you. And you don't look it, so something's suiting you. My screen appears to have frozen, but hopefully you can hear. Well, I know you can hear me because you're smiling and nodding and everything. So over to Lesley. So welcome Hils and welcome Lesley. So you are the perimenopausal expert, apparently, Lesley. So
Yeah.
tell us a bit about you and what is perimenopause.
So I'm an integrative women's health coach, and like Hills, I've been on my own personal perimenopause journey. I initially trained about 8 years ago as a personal trainer, and found that I was really mainly working with women in their 40s, as I was myself, and many of them in their late 30s and 40s struggling with hormone change. And so I started going down this route of developing my knowledge. I did a course called the Third Age Woman, and then trained as a coach because I really feel like being able to bring all aspects of a woman's life into this transition phase is really important. Um, and um, and I work one to one and in group workshops. My real take is that there is an opportunity in perimenopause. There is an opportunity in this transition from through peri to postmenopause. And that this transition, you ask, what is it? Perimenopause kind of means around menopause. If we were to define menopause, it actually means that one day, 12 months after your last menstrual cycle, and then after that, you're postmenopausal. So before that, we're going through a phase where our hormones are changing because our ovaries are not necessarily producing the same levels of estrogen and progesterone every month. And those changing levels of hormones can have a knock-on impact on our on lots of different aspects of our well-being. From, it can be brain fog, it can be mood swings, it could be joint aches and pains, hot flashes, insomnia, a wide range of symptoms associated with those hormone changes. But it also really highlights some of the aspects of where we might have holes in our well-being. We often have, as Hill says, this craving to kind of step away from our lives, but actually we can't do that because we've got the responsibilities to step away from our lives so that we can allow ourselves to transform and understand what the next part of our lives can be. We're only halfway through. We've got a whole lot more that we can contribute. But I think often the dialogue around aging in the Western societies is that actually, well, you've run out of time now if you're perimenopause. Yeah. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to rethink our self-care, rethink how we prioritize our health and well-being, to understand, to be empowered through understanding our hormone change, but not to allow ourselves to be bogged down it, not to be kind of dreading every symptom, but actually going, what is this an indicator of? So yes, it's an indicator of hormone change, but actually if my digestion is a bit off, is it about hormones? Is it about actually stress levels? Is it that I didn't sleep very well, or is it something I ate? You know, so like being able to interrogate and understand ourselves at this point in our lives, I think, is really important.
Thank you for that explanation. It's interesting that not many women seem to know that menopause actually is the one day. So I was pleased to hear you say that. And the perimenopause bit, it's taken me a long time to get my head around that, because I just stopped one day and that was up, and I didn't have any problems. Having said that, I've had 4 different versions of cancer, so maybe there were signs there that I wasn't picking up. So who knows? But everything is fine and dandy now. What kind of age do people typically start getting symptoms of perimenopause?
So our hormones start to shift and change from our late 30s. So for some women, they actually start to experience these symptoms 38, 39, 40. Mm-hmm. For the majority of women, it's from your mid to late 40s onwards. For some women, they might just reach menopause and that's it. And I have a conversation with my mother. It's like, well, I can remember having one hot flush, but actually sometimes that's because that they're just not tuned in. She, might have been struggling with her mental health and other health issues and not necessarily tuned those things in. The typical age of menopause in this country, I think, is about 52.
How funny! I was exactly 52. Well, exactly 52 when I had my last show, which was a week before my mastectomy. So that's why I remember it significantly. I remember saying to my mum, "Thank God I've got that out of the way a week before, because that would have been a right faff, mastectomy and period at the same time. It would have been a right freaking mess. Blood everywhere." But so late 30s then onwards, people start to get symptoms. So we're between end of 30s and early 50s then.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some women, they experience it more have more symptoms postmenopausally. So they might stop menstruating, and then find that that's when they experience more of the hot flashes and insomnia and joint aches and pains. But a lot of women, I would say that the majority of women that I've worked with, that the first thing that shows up is around mood, motivation, libido, and feeling a bit foggy. Yeah. And the kind of heightened PMS and feeling a bit like the red mist descends, and then feeling less stress resilient. And they are subtle changes but once you start tracking those changes with your cycle, you realize that they are very hormonally linked. A menstrual cycle of tracking is one of the tools I think I think it's useful throughout our entire menstruating lives as an amazing tool, but when it comes to our late 30s, 40s, can be a particular, and it's most relevant if you're not on hormonal birth control, but it's an incredibly insightful tool, both into any symptoms you're experiencing, but also whether you apply any kind of supplements or meditation or food dietary changes. It's an opportunity to see whether or not it's actually having an impact as well. One of the things that can often happen is that women seeking an answer, there's so much information out there, seeking an answer can end up taking a whole host of different supplements and not really be quite clear about why, and not really quite clear about whether they're working, and then they kind of find it really hard to stop taking them because they don't have enough evidence as to they don't want to feel worse. So the menstrual cycle tracking as a tool, both to notice as our cycle might lengthen and then shorten, our bleed might lengthen, and it also gives us tools if we do want to go to the doctor to talk about HRT, to talk about supports. Then we've actually got kind of evidence there that's really useful to kind of support that discussion.
When you say tracking, are you talking about just writing down and keeping a note yourself, or are you talking about an app? In this day and age, everything seems to have an app, doesn't it?
There are apps out there. There are lots of menstrual cycle tracking apps. There's one, I use one called Clue and one called Life, just because I'm always intrigued by the two different, by seeing what the difference might be. But actually, I just use those to track and predict my cycle. And because then I use that to understand my energy, but actually I keep tabs. So for my clients, and I think I've got a free download, which I'm happy to share with your audience, of just a tracker that you can just print off, and it's just 28 little segments in a circle, and every day you might, at the end of the day, just ask yourself the question of how do I feel, and that could be that on that you put tired, stressed, low, or energized, motivated, or you might put itchy skin, but upset tummy, just a couple of words. But I found that so useful. There's also an app called Balance, which has been developed by Dr. Louise Newson, who does a lot of, you see her on the media all the time talking about menopause. She's a very keen advocate of HRT, and she's got an app called Balance, and which then enables you to track all of your perimenopause symptoms and then be able to print them off to take to a doctor or a menopause clinic.
Yeah, that's the one I was using, or kind of have been using. Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the symptoms, because although I feel like I was perimenopausal for some time, like really probably 3 years before I really had like those sort of more obvious symptoms. It was only when I suddenly just stopped bleeding and didn't bleed for like 6 months, and that's when the big like symptoms really kicked in. The hot flushes, they're the sort of obvious one, because we don't really have those for any other reason, kind of thing. And but for me, it was really mentally and emotionally that's been the hardest thing actually with perimenopause, and that was something I wasn't prepared for and I didn't know about. And it's like, it's easy to kind of say things, and it's almost like it doesn't really mean anything, because for me it didn't feel like mood swings. It was like, no, my whole life is crumbling, like everything is going wrong and I'm doubting everything and I can't make a decision and I feel like I have to leave my partner, and I'm questioning everything. And it was almost like a really bigger, I suppose, spiritual, for want of a better word, but that sort of more existential, like really big questions was sort of coming in, and it was just like, what is like happening? And I almost really didn't know kind of what was happening. It was only through knowing you and getting some help from you, Lesley, that it was like, oh, okay, I'm not like going mad, and this is actually, other people experience this. That helped me a lot in every aspect. Even just that empathy and understanding really helped my partner, because he was a bit like, well, like, why don't you want to have sex anymore, or like, what's going on here, or like I didn't understand what was going on, so then I couldn't explain it to him, so then he was just like, oh god, like our relationship's falling apart. But being able to fully understand that and know that other people are going through something similar really helped to help both of us, really, to just that level of understanding is so important.
Oh, I think it's huge. I mean, my husband does say that it's very hard to be despised once a month for a few days, but because over time he's understood that it's cyclical, it's connected to very low progesterone and low estrogen, and that actually that give me a week and I will feel better again. And that, so he's now, and I think this applies to everyone in our lives. So then he and the children allow me extra space. Now I'm sandwiched by caring for my elderly mother who has Alzheimer's, and so she doesn't understand and cannot. So that's where, and I think this is where it's really interesting. And I wanted to talk a little bit about perimenopause and working, and perimenopause and managing your other your other commitments, because like we can talk to our families and we can talk to our friends and we can manage our social diaries, but sometimes with work or with other commitments that we have, it's much harder to do so. And so I talk to my clients and anybody whose ear I can About honestly, I get talking to me at parties, and I will always bring up perimenopause. I'll find a way. But to allow to create the space in our lives to allow rest, to allow nourishment, to allow ourselves to fill our cups, so that actually, like, we can still function. So increasingly big employers in the UK are developing menopause policies and menopause working groups and better understanding, which is obviously taking time to filter through. But when we run our own businesses, or you work in the NHS, or you run a consultancy where you have to be on the top of your game, then can be very hard to manage. And that's where the tweaks and tracking and supporting ourselves around it. So like, if you know that there is, so by using a menstrual cycle tracker and saying, well, actually, I'm at peak energy this day and this day every month, kind of around ovulation or around when I might possibly ovulate, then that's when I plan the presentations or the interviews and that kind of thing. When I know that my energy is at a low ebb, is going to be at low ebb towards the end of my cycle, and I might not even know when the end of my cycle might be. If I know my energy is going to be at low ebb, then I can't get out of that presentation, but I can delegate some of the preparation. I can have somebody else in the room with me. I can make sure that I'm really well rested, that I add rest in to what's happening, so that if I lose a word, like brain fog is something that can be really, really confidence sapping, that I've got somebody there who's acts as backup.
It's interesting what you were saying about the low ebb and the choosing the days to do presentations. I think that's a fascinating observation and so useful, particularly with women in leadership positions, because if you're up there with brain fog, a lot of people struggle to do presentations anyway, although by the time you've got to leadership you've normally got over yourself, but it does happen. I was a bit concerned though when you said that, for 1 week in the month, mood swings and your family life and so on and so forth. I mean, do people actually have to go through that? Why can't that be adjusted?
So again, I use that as an indicator of how well I'm looking after myself.
Okay.
So what happens, and I've had I've had numerous clients who it's almost been that heightened PMS is what's tipped them over into wanting to work with me, because they've got some other symptoms that feel like they're under control, and maybe they've tried HRT, but it's the mood stuff that really frightens them, because it feels like they feel like they're not themselves anymore. They don't want that for their families, and often, like, those 4 key pillars of self-care on getting a good night's sleep, having good balanced nutrition, so no peaks and troughs, cutting out alcohol, which then helps to improve your sleep and your blood sugar balance, getting movement, getting daylight, which really helps, and understanding the impact of external stressors on your body. Developing that self-knowledge and awareness and adding in things to support those pillars can make a massive, massive difference along the lines, as can some supplements as well.
And it's interesting.
So it doesn't have to be inevitable at all.
No, and I also think, while there might be, we kind of revere the summer part of our cycle. I like to use the seasons, right? So the winter is when you bleed and you need to rest, and the summer's like that middle bit. And it's like, it's so revered that, like, the summer's the best season to be in, when you're kind of out and lively and you feel sexy, and it's like it's all going on and everything feels effortless. But I think there's gifts as well, like in each part of the cycle. And I'm tracking my cycle for a number, probably 12 years or something, like off and on. But from a work perspective, like, what I noticed was in that more wintry sort of like bleed time, I'm much more creative and I can write content and I can, the ideas come, and it's a different quality of kind of what I can do. And I used to track it, and I still track it on my calendar. Actually, I put it on my calendar, like when my seasons are, so that I can try and use that to sort of guide like where my energy is, but actually what's the sort of best bit about this cycle, and what, this part of the cycle, and what's the, where's the power, like what can I do that really works really well for me at this time. So yeah, there, I think we can use.
Yeah, I think there's a real power in it, definitely. I really like that kind of luteal phase, that autumn phase, in many ways. And because, again, for that enhanced creativity, for that kind of slowdown, for that kind of, actually almost I maximize connection with myself and therefore with my clients. What I was going to say, something has gone out of my head.
It's so important. You mentioned about the body, knowing your body, understanding your body, listening to your body. Yes. You also mentioned gut health and supplements. So how important for the listener is gut health?
I think gut health is really, really useful thing to focus on. We can over focus on it though, like anything. Because basically changing levels of hormones actually affect the microbiomes. They affect the levels of different kinds of bacteria in our gut. And so then it affects our digestion. And I have, and clients have, my personal story is that I've developed an intolerance to dairy, which was never there before. I never had a problem with digesting dairy, but I now find that actually I can have a little bit of goat's or sheep's milk or sheep's cheese, but I cannot have cow's milk products. And I see that as an indicator of a change in digestion. But one of the things with this imbalance that comes about as a result, sometimes of excess estrogen, sometimes as too little, and also there's a slowdown. Lowering levels of progesterone actually affects peristalsis. They affect the smooth muscle tissue of the gut, so how food transitions through the gut. And so focusing on gut health by including plenty of fiber, including healthy fats, making sure you chew your food, having a rest between meals so that your body has a chance to kind of properly digest food. Allowing intermittent fasting now can sometimes be detrimental to women in this perimenopause phase, because lower levels of blood sugar, we can be very, very sensitive to levels of blood sugar. So sometimes intermittent fasting isn't ideal. We're all individuals. But gut health, I run a 3-week gut health program, and it's amazing the impact that has on my clients when they, in terms of their, like the brain fog, their stress resilience, itchy skin, IBS symptoms, even headaches and sleep, all improve as a result of just of a 3-week focus on healthy guts. And that means it's a 3 weeks of kind of quite extended support. And I do use some supplementation in that program. But when it comes to supplements in general, there are some things that are really useful for women in perimenopause. But we are all individuals in terms of how we absorb those supplements, what the rest of our diet is like. One thing I often suggest is something like is a magnesium supplement, because it can be very helpful for anxiety, for sleep, for muscle recovery, even for digestion. But finding the right magnesium supplement isn't as straightforward as going to Boots or Holland and Barrett and buying a magnesium supplement, because often they aren't absorbed, or some of them will just go straight through you. And that's again where kind of tracking and knowing your body can be really, really helpful, and seeking advice. There are some herbal supplements that some women find really helpful. So when it comes, for example, when it comes to mood, it might be things like evening primrose oil, or ashwagandha, or St. John's wort, or rhodiola can help a little bit with stress resilience. But again, every individual will respond to those supplements differently. So I'm always very cautious even about writing anything about supplementation on my social media or emails, because I think it's such an individual
Absolutely. I'm the same. In fact, I don't recommend supplementation until people do testing thing with me, because you can, if you've got too much magnesium, for example, or calcium or whatever, and you're then taking supplementation, you're adding to already an overburdened body. You're actually going to make things worse. But that's where you come back to the tracking thing, because when you know your body and you feel rubbish because when you look at what you've taken, oh well, it could be that. But a lot of people end up, spending a fortune, wasting a fortune on guessing with the supplements, and it's just so sad. So it's waste of money, waste of time, makes you feel worse. What's to like about that? So having an assessment and a hair mineral analysis, which is what I do with my clients, and I do a blood analysis as well. That then shows exactly what's going on, so you can then make an informed decision. So Hils, have you gone through all of the testing and different things, or you've just been experimenting and tracking?
Yeah, just been experimenting and tracking really. Yeah, I'm kind of learning more and more about just different things to try around diet, exercise and stuff. I definitely found I started running again a few months ago, and that has helped with particularly the hot flushes. Kind of stopped immediately really as soon as I started running again, which is quite interesting. So yeah, just sort of trying some different things really. But it's interesting what you were talking about, stress resilience, and I think what I'm learning from Lesley and from other women that talk about perimenopausal stuff is that stress has really a massive impact on like the rest of your hormones. And of course, it's great to know that, but it's not always easy to reduce the stress in your life. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, it's an interesting one. And I just think, what's come up for me as we're talking is this, we're cyclical beings, us women generally, and we're not as static and linear, whereas men, I think, are a little bit more kind of, they just wake up feeling the same every day. I mean, I don't know, I'm not a man, but that's kind of what I'm gathering. Whereas I think they cannot possibly understand what it feels like to be so changeable. And I mean, they just make jokes about it, but they don't really get it. And then to have this kind of constant sort of cycling and changing, but almost like the stress doesn't change, you know what I mean? Or the level of work that you have to do, or whatever in your daily life. I mean, I have a 2-year-old and a business, so there is stress, and it's not an easy thing to kind of go, oh well, I just need to reduce my stress, because it's like, I'm juggling a lot. And so it's just I just think it's an interesting one that society just isn't set up particularly for us women to thrive within that very linear kind of way that society is set up. But maybe we won't get into the patriarchy and all of that. But it always brings up for me, it's like with all of these things, when we're not supported by our environment, whether that's society or family or tribe or community or whatever, we struggle more. Of course we do. And we notice that having a 2-year-old, and we've got no family nearby, we have no support, no one else to look after him apart from when he goes to nursery. And it's just the two of us, struggling on and on, like all the time, having to be there obviously 24/7 for him. And it's hard. It's really, there isn't really a way of kind of reducing the stress of that. And that's a constant. And I do notice I snap a lot more when I'm in that premenstrual bit. The patience, the tolerance is a lot lower, sadly, poor little thing. And of course, he's not old enough to understand. And it's not easy, but so I think it's important that
You're a woman. We're tough. We're resilient.
We are tough and resilient. We are.
Lesley, I want to pick up on what you said about the dairy, because I recommend to all my clients that they cease dairy immediately. And I believe that the dairy industry is partly responsible for all this menopausal stuff that we're going through, because when you consider the amount of hormones that cows are injected, and which obviously is consumed through dairy products, dairy is so acidic, it's mucus forming, it's just not good for us, altogether. Luckily I live here in the Algarve in Portugal, and we don't have many cows here. We have sheep, lots of sheep and goats, so I'm blessed. And then I have plant-based milk. If I choose to have milk, it will be some kind of plant thing. So I think stopping dairy is a thing that I would be recommending to people who are, well, as I say, I recommend it to all my clients anyway, but specifically if you're perimenopausal and you've been on the pill, because you've got all the whammies. We never had conversations about menopause, perimenopause, nothing. I grew up, it's only a recent phenomenon, and when you think about society today has been brought up on milk, has been brought up on the hormonal things that are in processed foods, the way our environment, what's in the water, the whole bit. So it's all self-made, and we can undo it. But the first thing is being aware of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the awareness, evidence-based awareness for the individual is really important. I think so. I think as Hils was talking about the stress resilience and mood and snappiness, I was thinking that actually, as long as that the awareness with an element of compassion to ourselves is really important, so that we can forgive ourselves when we do get snappy, because then actually we can, even though your son might not understand, having that conversation with him and feeling the energy of that is really important and valuable for him to understand those ups and downs. And I would say the same with dairy and toxins in the products in our environment, is that I would never tell somebody to stop. I would ask them or suggest that they give themselves 3 weeks without dairy products, explore alternatives, and track the impact of that on gut health, on their symptoms. And then that gives them the evidence, that self-generated evidence that it feels better for them. And then it's a lot easier to then say to give it up.
A lot of my clients are cancer people with
so
cancer, so it's not a choice, it really is. I insist on it. Obviously other clients, at the end of the day, everybody has a choice. It's not our place, no matter how qualified we are or what our views are. It's up to the individuals to make their own choices, but we're here to educate them, help and support them as best we can in the ways that we do. So that's all we can do, isn't it, at the end of the day?
Absolutely.
So any top tips before we close, Lesley or Hils?
I mean, I think to start, if you're in this menopause phase, to start tracking, whether it's that you make a note in a diary or a journal, or whether you use one of the tracking apps like Balance or Clue, that's a really useful way of developing self-understanding, and developing kind of compassion for yourself through this phase. But the other is to understand that that there's another side, a bit like where you are in toddler years, Hils. He's going to grow, he'll go to school, he'll be less dependent on you, it will change. Again, there is this other side, which is where you are now, Elaine, where you can create incredible change and incredible things with your lives, but then to understand that perimenopause can sometimes open insights into what that might be, but also open the door to self-care, to supporting your physical and mental well-being in a way that means that you thrive through your 50s, 60s, 70s and beyond. And that the work that you put in now has a really, really good and positive payoff.
I think we should start the conversation much earlier. We should start it in the schools.
Yes.
Because
it is now on the curriculum in schools. Menopause.
Is it really? Really? Oh, how interesting.
In secondary school.
Only in secondary school,
But
well, that makes sense. I'm pleased to hear that. So some things have improved since I was at school many years ago. Wonderful. Hils, have you got any top tips?
I think for me it's building up awareness and knowledge. So follow Lesley, follow some other people that talk about perimenopause. Do some research about it. Try and understand what is happening to you, because that really, really helped me, and it also helped because I could explain things to my partner, and then he started doing some research. So instead of Googling like how do I get my partner interested in sex, he was Googling like what happens to your libido in perimenopause, and then going, oh, okay, it's honestly like that empathy and that understanding. Just it creates such a different vibe, in relationships, but also in the relationship with ourselves. I think, yeah, that having an understanding, and getting some help and support if you need it. And also for me, I think there's a really positive aspect to perimenopause and menopause. And I know we've been talking about how do you manage it, but actually it is this amazing transition that all women go through when we shift from the mother archetype to the wise woman archetype, and we're going through really a butterfly change. So we're going into a cocoon and we turn into mush, and the mush doesn't feel very good, but what do we want to create on the other side of that? And actually, how can we, enjoy the mush knowing that we're creating something else? So that's kind of where I am, is just starting to look into it and trying to be a lot more positive about it. And what can I do that will support that? As Lesley said, I think doing the groundwork during the mush can help, with becoming the beautiful butterfly inside. So yeah.
All of the experts I've interviewed for my podcast over the years who've spoken about the menopausal situation, they've all agreed that when somebody is changing, so as you say, late 30s roughly, if their body, if their immune system is in tip-top condition, they don't have any symptoms, they just sail through, which is what happened to me. So I didn't experience, so that's why I found it harder to accept that there is this perimenopausal thing, because I didn't experience it. So therefore I don't have compassion for that particular. I'm beginning to understand it now, because it's very common. But my frustration is, if we had looked after ourselves, myself included, early on, but we didn't have the education, so we can't beat ourselves up for something that we didn't know, but we do know now. So educating young women, I think, is really, young people, is really important, because that way you're less likely to have symptoms, because if you've boosted your immune system, then you're in a good place to deal with whatever your body's going to throw at you, because as you've rightly said, everybody is different, and we need to know our own body, don't we? The other thing I would add on to both of your tips is to keep a food diary as well, because food really does affect mood swings, particularly sugar content, minimizing sugar as well, because the cravings and so on. And copper has a big impact on the cycle as well. And I find that with when I do the hair analysis and the mineral imbalances, copper is a big factor. Some people have too much, some people don't have enough, but it's a factor at the menopausal, not the cycle, monthly cycle thing. So thank God I don't have all of that to deal with. Other things, and also Hils, even though your son's 2, the things don't change. He will always be dependent upon you. You'll always be his mum. My daughter is 40. My son is 28. My grandchildren are 20 and 18. So there's different stages, and they need you all the time. So just keep strong, keep resilient, and keep your awareness about your body. So thank you, ladies. It's been lovely chatting with you and hearing your experiences from an expert, Lesley, and an experiencing mush person, Hils.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Elaine. Lovely.
Thank you.
Most welcome. And Jess will put the contact details for you underneath the video and the podcast things wherever we go. Okay, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.